So welcome again. My name is Claire Klieger. I am one of the advisors in career services. I work specifically with arts and sciences students in the college. I am joined as well by my two fabulous colleagues in the office, Jackie, as well as our brand new colleague, fresh this week, Mark, who is also with us and who will be helping out with the chat and sharing resources throughout, and who will probably also be happy to jump in with their perspectives throughout this resume workshop. This is what we're here for, to sort of chat about resumes. So hopefully that's why you're participating today. And I thought I'd start by just asking you all how long you think a recruiter typically spends initially reviewing a resume. Feel free to put your reactions to this in the chat. What do you think? How long does a recruiter or an employer spend evaluating? What do folks think? Ooh, 20 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 3 minutes. Okay, so folks are saying like it's, not very long. It's a fairly pessimistic bunch, or just a sign that we're in clickbait culture and people are used to short attention spans. And I would say this is a sign that you're pretty savvy, because you are correct that it is short. It's less than 10 seconds initially. That's not to say that that's all the time that somebody will ever look at your resume, but at first glance, it's really important that the resume catches somebody's eye, and that initial determination about whether or not you go in the maybe pile, in which case they will absolutely take a closer and longer look, or the no pile. And so how your resume is constructed, how it's structured, what information you put on it, and how it's designed in order to attract attention really does matter. And so this can be stressful, right? And we want to try, and everyone loves working on resumes. Yes, you love that feeling of like tweaking it constantly to make sure it's like perfect for the millionth time, and that feeling of, is anybody going to like it or see it, or what does this matter? No, that's not how we love. No. So the goal of this is to trying to work smarter, not harder, so that you can really tailor this document so that it appeals to your intended audience and really stands out from the pack in the way that you want. So what are the challenges with doing this? The employers really only have what you give them. It's very easy to sort of put together something where what you've done, and sometimes that means that you forget that other people are less familiar with your experiences, and you don't necessarily intuitively describe things in a way that's innately clear, or you just assume that because it's clear to you, it's clear to other people. Maybe you're not sure what an employer wants, and so you're not sure how to structure your resume in a way that's going to, market yourself most effectively. So it's really important to then, I almost work backwards from that. So often things can kind of get lost in translation, right? Like you're putting this document out there and you want to know, are you really communicating effectively? Some common pitfalls are maybe not describing the most relevant tasks, or assuming, again, common knowledge, and especially for folks who have really technical skills. So any people on the call who have lab or bench research or any engineering related backgrounds, especially if you're going for something in a different field or something that's medical based and you're going for something outside of that, you may be describing something that someone's not familiar with and they may not understand. So you need to do it in a way that's going to make sense for your reader. So how do you create a resume that's good? It's with your audience in mind. It's adaptable for the experience at hand, or the goal at hand, and it really capitalizes on all of your previous experiences. So there's not one right way to put this together. So something that you see out there that says like, it has to be like this. Resumes must be set up in this way or in this format. That's just not true. This also means, by the way, because resumes are very subjective, it can be frustrating for you when you send I guarantee you, if you send your resume to 5 different people to look at, even 5 different people in our office, you're going to get 5 different opinions on, or suggestions, which is not to say that, each of those things are right, or that, or wrong, but that, it's subjective and there's different perspectives on what makes sense or how to prioritize information. And so at the end of the day, you need to create a document that presents the information in a way that makes sense to you, and especially to intuiting sort of what does your intended reader or your employer that you're most interested in, what kinds of things are they looking for? How can you use the job description and the keywords at that organization to really sort of set yourself apart? Are you capitalizing on all experiences? Are you drawing from extracurricular activities and volunteer work, class projects, even research that you've done? Are your descriptions impactful? Are you using strong action verbs, and is your resume tailored? Having a generic resume to be one thing to all people is just not going to be as strong or as effective as really having different versions of your resume. It's okay to mix tenses. If you have, even if it's something that you're doing right now, maybe you were on a committee last semester with a student club, and this semester you're on a different committee. So, or you organized an event last semester. So that might be in past tense, but you're going to be working on something upcoming that could be in future tense. And you could have something else that's in present tense. As long as it accurately reflects what you've done, that's okay. You don't want it to be too crowded. We'll talk about that. I would say avoid any margins that are smaller than 0.5. That's the absolute smallest you can go in margins, and know that you're probably constantly always updating your resume. So basic formatting, if you're talking about the top of this is your contact information. You've got, your name, your phone, your email. These days, you don't need your full address. That's kind of a passé thing that's not necessary anymore. I just posted a blog yesterday. I didn't write it. It was a Muse blog that I found that I think is really good, that explains why this is now considered passé. So if you're going to list a location on your resume, that's fine, but you don't need a mailing address anymore. This is one way you can do it. It's not the only way that would be sort of space efficient. You could also add, if you wanted to, a LinkedIn URL. If you're going to do that, I recommend customizing it so you have the sort of within LinkedIn, not on your resume, so that you've got that shorter LinkedIn URL instead of a long URL to put within there. So get rid of that big long thing at the end, for example, so that you've just got your first and last name, for instance. Other tips here for yourself is your resume should be organized in a way that it's immediately apparent what you want. So in this case, hopefully it's you know that this person is looking for things in media because they have a media experience section. So they've pulled, as you can see, experiences both from extracurricular and internships in the same section. That's fine. As long as you're not using work experience, it's okay to do that. They've also got a relevant experience section here to draw from courses that are, this is relevant to your audience, not to your courses necessarily, right? So, and you would tweak this depending upon the positions for which you're applying. A technical skills section you can have too. Usually skills would go at the bottom, but in this case, for roles that are especially technical, a technical skills section could go like this right after education. Within the education section, just a note, you're listing, it's University of Pennsylvania, it's candidate for Bachelor of Arts if you're in the college, Bachelor of Science if you're in Wharton or engineering, and whatever your major or concentration is after that. If you're undeclared, you can say intended major or intended concentration. You wouldn't list it until it is declared, or you can just list it without a course of study just yet. That's fine. Make note of the, there's white space, use of bullets. You're also seeing things here in terms of formatting, like using one stylistic device for section headers and something else to indicate your organization name and something else to indicate titles. You want to be consistent throughout your document. The highlighted here in yellow is just for an example to sort of draw this out. It's not because you should use highlighting in yellow to randomly draw attention to things on your resume, but here as well to sort of show incorporating keywords to reinforce technical skills is also something to bear in mind. This is a different example. So, this shows you how you could have something completely different than in this case, for something that's more policy focused, where you would be highlighting things like research and legal experience, where again, you could be drawing from a range of, experiences, and be really thinking about the use again of those sort of strong action verbs. You want to avoid things like, assisted or helped or attended. If you have a helping verb like that, think about, we have a list of great strong action verbs on our website actually that you can pull from, but those passive verbs don't really tell people what you've done. They're sort of vague. And it's not to say that you should ever overstate anything, but rather be more specific in how you've contributed to any of those initiatives. So if you helped plan an event, what did that look like? Were you arranging, were you securing vendors? Were you raising money? Were you designing flyers using a particular program? Any of those things is both more specific and more impressive because it details, the ways in which you were responsible for subsets of those things. So also think about your audience with different descriptions. So here's an example. If anybody's in Kite and Key, I don't know, who gives tours here on campus, as a tour guide for Penn. So depending upon your audience, you might describe that very differently. So on the left, we have an example for how you might phrase that for nonprofits. Both of these things involve the same function, but how you talk about it might be really, really different. So leading tours for, of a large nonprofit, as opposed to promoting Penn's brand, if you were applying for, say, marketing roles, equally accurate, but really different ways of talking about it depending upon that audience. Presenting key statistics, showcasing campus highlights, you can see that those two descriptions are very different, and yet both make sense. You wouldn't talk about promoting Penn's brand for a nonprofit. That would seem weird, probably, right? So you want to be very cognizant about how you're thinking about accurately describing what you've done, never overstating, but in a way that makes the most sense for your audience. We talked about avoiding the sort of assisted. These are some other passive things to kind of stay away from, just because they're vague and they don't really give your reader a clear idea of what you've done. These are some examples of some of the stronger action verbs that I mentioned, and that we have many more of these on our website. So other examples of strong ways to describe things. So, instead of just saying that you coordinated events, you want to really think about your impact. Don't just describe think about what did you do with any of your organizations or in work experiences that you've had before, but how you've had an impact. What are you most proud of? Where have been your successes? So you coordinated 3 conferences, and think about ways that you can quantify that. So in this instance, for how many people, or this was the highest attendance in the last 10 years. Great. So you see assisted in program planning and implementation, but again, the how, developed marketing materials and provided logistical reports, support for 4 neighborhood public outreach projects, helping professor with book research. Again, how, so you can always want to drill down to the how to give yourself the ideas of specific things, and where possible, finding ways to look for the quantifiable things that you can draw from, whether that's specific numbers or percentages, or maybe it was the first time something was done. It's never, an inaugural thing, right? Or if you were able to reach a certain number of people, or convince someone to come around to a certain point of view or establishing a new partnership that had never existed before, right? So sometimes it's by numbers and other times there might be different ways to measure that impact. So other things that you want to then avoid in terms of general pet peeves, and if you want to make this more interactive, you can sort of have your own resume out on your computer and have a little notepad, and you can play tic-tac-toe with this in terms of things that you found. Hopefully you end up with if you found this on your resume, give yourself an X. And if you've avoided this common arrow, you can give yourself an O. Let's see where you fall. Be curious to see how many people can sort of avoid this. So formatting inconsistencies. This is a big one. Mark and I did a resume review earlier today, and this was one that we found. Actually, it happens a lot. The little dash, right? Whether you've got inconsistent spacing between the dates, or the big dash versus the little dash, like you see here at the bottom. So you just want to look for those small things. I know it seems like not a big deal, but it sort of paints the picture of not being able to have attention to detail for any of these things. So mark this if you see this on your resume and see where you are. Spacing. I know Penn students, you guys are all incredibly impressive. You had to be to get into Penn. Sometimes you lose that confidence once you arrive amongst the other impressive people who are here, but you did. You had to be amazing to get to this Ivy League school. And so usually you have lots of things to put on your resume, and as a result, it's difficult to make it all fit onto one page. And so sometimes people are tempted to cram it all in, and it looks like this jumbled forest on the left, or where information is tough to find and it's kind of a jumbled mess. And what we want is this ordered, pristine, calm experience on the right. So take a look at your resume, and what's the reaction that you have? Is it ordered? Is it calm? Is it nice to look at? Or is it kind of overwhelming? So here's an example of what I mean. So it's too crowded, you've got then on the left, even if you've got evenly spaced here in the middle, it's nice to make use of indenting or different kinds of spacing where, for example, you've got bigger spaces between your sections than you would between individual listings. All of that sort of helps create natural breaks and trains your mind or your reader's eye to makes it easier to find the right information or help certain things stand out more easily. Yeah, there you go. And everybody's favorites, typos. You can't rely on spell check alone. I can't stress this enough. So whether you read things out loud to yourself, that's a good trick, or even better, have somebody else look at it, have one of us in career services look at it. But all caps does not pass the spell check. So it's very easy for spelling errors, especially if you're using all caps for section titles, to go unnoticed. And there, of course, are things that are real words, but they may not be the words that you want. So let's avoid, if we're talking about things like assess or discuss, maybe you probably didn't mean discus or something else that's, again, real words that show up. So just you want to take a close look at things that might appear there, or even just missing words, right? Like that happens all the time too. So proofreading is really important. So hopefully you all didn't end up with tic-tac-toe or bingo or whatever you want to think with your resume, but just it's a good idea to give it a fresh look. Additional resources, and thank you again to Mark and Jackie for putting these in the chat throughout that we have as part of this. We have a whole prepare application materials section on our website with resume samples with an editable resume guide. And in addition to that, we have targeted resume. Increasingly, employers are relying on artificial intelligence to take a first pass at resumes. And so this allows you to upload your resume and a copy of a job description and sort of see how your resume might score and offer specific suggestions for improving to have a higher score so you can get on that sort of short list for review so that a person is more likely to look at your resume and pass that. So that's my spiel for resumes in general. I hope that helps as a good introduction. I'm also gonna let my colleagues feel free to hop on and say anything that they might want to say, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Claire. That was awesome. Thank you to all of you who attended. And please feel free to share any questions. You can unmute yourself. You can write in the chat or just